let's get into assessing all of these cuts and I'll figure out what I get to keep and what I'm going to put in the faints jar. This is all still laid out the way that it was last night when I tried to predict my cuts straight off the still. Honestly, it's a bit of a mess and hard to work with, so let me clean it up. I'll get right back to you. This is the first jar right after the foreshut, so I was fairly certain that was not going to be used in this product. I collected in smaller jars because I had no idea at what point that cut was going to come into the hearts. This was the jar that I thought coming off the still was starting to taste clean. So I predicted that this was going to be the beginning of hearts. The first 7 jars went off without any problem whatsoever. At this point, I started to notice the offtake speed up. So I tested the ABV and sure enough, it had dropped a little bit. So I wondered if that was the beginning of the tails, just because I wasn't sure exactly what to look for. After adjusting the still a little bit, turns out that I got another 5 jars of hearts. This one I was almost certain was still hearts. This one I wasn't sure about. And after that I was absolutely positive that I was getting tails, but I did still collect a few. They're on the table over there. If we get to them, we get to them. So here's the plan, guys. First of all, I was advised by lots of people to let these things sit and breathe at least overnight, which is why they had the coffee filters on top just to keep the bugs and dust and everything out. But if it improves the final product by allowing me to assess them better at this point in time, I am totally on board with losing, what, 1% if that. Now the plan to assess these things is I am going to smell them and I am going to taste them. I am not going to drink them. You may notice how many jars are here, and even drinking a teaspoon of each of these may have a significant effect on my ability to do this job properly, so I am not going to be drinking any now. I have a spit bucket down here. I won't show you that. Don't worry. The plan is to put 1 teaspoon out of the jar into my tasting glass, and then follow that up with 2 teaspoons of filtered water. And I'm aiming for around about 30% ABV. Adding that water to it and knocking the ABV way down is going to open it up a little bit in theory and let me assess it a little bit better as well. Everything on this table is between around about 88 and 92%. Honestly, I didn't really care about the ABV once I knew that I was hitting up right around 90%, and the reason for that is I did not trust chasing an ABV to help me with the cuts. I wanted to do it by my senses and get used to doing it that way. Obviously, this is going to be a pretty tedious process for you to watch, so that's why I've got this thing over here. I'm going to rip through this pretty quick, and as I go through it, I'm going to put my notes up here so you guys can follow along and we'll see what we get at the end. I don't know what to expect. Here we go. I've also got a whole lot of water lined up to clean my mouth out and also clean my cup out between each taste. Number 1 has a very sort of sweet chemically taste to it, which is what I've heard heads described as a whole lot. So I'm not going anywhere near that. It is also quite hot. Obviously being watered down to 30%, that's not too bad. I'm going to keep going and I'll come back when I get to the point where I think I found the difference between heads and hearts. Alright, so I've tasted everything from 1 through to 8 and everything is fairly close to what I remember it being the other day and to the way I laid it out off the still, but everything has cleaned up a little bit, which is exactly why everyone says to cover these things up and let them breathe for at least 24 hours. If anything, I think I may have been more conservative last night on the still, probably because I wasn't sure how to predict how it was going to clean up overnight. I think jar 6, which was the one that I thought was borderline and the hearts were coming after it, is actually pretty close to being hearts, but I'm not going to let it make the cut because I do pick up some of the flavors from the heads in that jar as well. One of the biggest things that I was unsure about going into this is whether or not I would be able to taste a difference. So I'll describe what I'm getting off this. Just be aware that I don't know the lingo, I don't know descriptor words, I don't know what I'm looking for, so I'm just going to tell you what I get. The further towards the 4s I went, the more sweet and super chemically it was. And as I moved down through the heads, that chemically taste transferred into kind of estery fake fruit. It started out as a fake peach flavor and morphed into a fake banana flavor, and both of them had kind of a weird chemically sweetness to them. Along with the fake sweetness, I was also getting, initially I thought of it as burn, but when I moved further into the hearts, I realized that that still felt like heat to me. And I don't think I've ever really experienced this, but honestly I don't know exactly how to describe it. The closest I can get to it is that they're both heat, and I guess you could consider them burn, especially if you put the two together, they would feel similar. It's almost like having like a thistle. It's kind of prickly. It's tingly and prickly, whereas the hearts seem to be more, it's heat, but it's not a burn. It's more of a warming sensation, if that makes sense. I guess a little bit like Vicks or Tiger Balm. That's not right. It's warming and it's hot, but it's not unpleasant. And I guess for someone like me who hasn't been used to this, I keep expecting that pleasant warming to turn into a burn, but it doesn't. It gets to that, it takes you right to that climax point and then backs down. I would love for you guys to describe how you perceive these things down below, because it is a perception thing and it's going to be different for everyone. But I'm sure there are common words and common ways of describing this. As I moved into the hearts, I also noticed the mouthfeel change. It got less slick and oily and got more towards a water mouthfeel. There's also a sweetness in the hearts, but it is more of an earthy, natural kind of sweetness. And I remember Teddy Sad saying that he gets a sweet bran flavor in these hearts, and I can kind of understand that maybe that's what it is. To me, it's more like sweet leaf litter, almost like rainforesty. God, that sounds wanky, but that's kind of what I'm getting. In any case, it's a very, very pleasant flavor, and I'm very glad it's in there. Anyway, I'm going to go through and test the rest, and I'll get back to you if I get anything weird. If not, I'll meet you at the tails. I have tasted all the way down to jar 24, which is the second or third jar into what I assumed the tails was. It turns out my assumption of the tails was spot on pretty much. So I'm going to be keeping jar 20, which is the one that I thought I was going to be keeping. I am going to be throwing out jar 21, which is the one I thought I was going to be throwing out. Problem is, I missed a whole lot of problem in between. There are 3 jars that I'm going to be putting into the faints inside the hearts cut, which is strange to me, and they taste the same as the tails, at least a little bit. So, I'll give you the rundown. From 7 through to 13 tasted exactly the same. I could not tell them apart. I went back and forth a couple of times just out of interest. Number 14, which is the one that I pulled aside when I said that I noticed the still acting differently, started to get a more of a burn to it, and almost I don't know how to describe it. It's like a nasty, really chemically unnatural sort of flavor. It's almost like cement, if you've ever had like a bit of cement end up in your mouth. Almost like your brain just doesn't know how to compute that flavor. It's just a weird chemical flavor that's kind of hot and dry and burny all at the same time. So number 14 had a little bit of that. Number 15 had some of it. Not as much, but still enough to make it, I don't want to put it in with anything else. Number 16 was back to exactly the same as 8 through 13. 17 was back to the hot cement weirdness again. 18 was the same as the other hearts again. And then 19 and 20, I couldn't pick up any off flavors. I couldn't pick up any weird heat, but I couldn't pick up anything in them. Like there was none of that sweet earthy brandy flavor, nothing. Just totally clean. I couldn't pick up anything in it. 21, which is where I've cut it off, is back to that cement flavor again. 22 is that cement flavor, but off the charts. It's just like a cement bomb. That's all I get out of it. I don't get anything else. Number 23 also has that cement bomb, but it's starting to get a little bit of a touch of sort of nasty wet dog. And then 24 down just gets worse and worse. Starts getting into this weird, funky, fungal foot disorder. Is my nice way of saying toe jams. It's nasty. So obviously none of that's going to be making it in. So, disclaimers. One, I haven't swallowed anything, but I am starting to feel a little bit tipsy. I guess just having it in your mouth and the vapors gets to you after a while. Two, I feel like my palate is blowing out. I've been sipping on water, but it does feel a little bit blown out. So taking those things into consideration, I decided to be pretty ruthless and keep any of those jars that I had questions about for the faints jar. I'm also thinking that what I might do is keep that 8 to 13 separate from 16, 18, 19 and 20. I'll keep those separate for now and just assess in a couple of days whether or not it is actually the same and whether or not I really want to mix the two. Maybe I'll keep them for two different things. So what I want to do now is package this stuff. I don't want it sitting around in open jars any longer. I'm going to be using these swing top jas glass. I know they've got silicone gaskets. These are PTFE wrapped, which I guess isn't entirely ideal, but it's what I've got for now, so it's what I'm going to be using. If you want to know what I'm talking about with these, I did a video on it earlier in the week. I will chuck a card for those up top as well. Alright team, so there we have it. We have 3.5 liters that I know is good and another 2 liters which I just want to wait and try it again when my palate's not all stressed out and just make sure that I actually dig it before I mix it with the others. Assuming that it's good, that's 5.5 liters at 91%, which isn't horrible. It would have been nice to get that extra couple of liters, but I'd rather be ruthless and I'd rather get rid of it and use it again later than mess this stuff up. Actually thinking about it, I'm going to keep those dodgy hearts separate from the rest of the faints as well and just come back to those some other time purely out of interest. In any case, I'm going to go sort that out. Thanks a bunch for hanging out with me and watching the video. If you've got any ideas on what would have caused those weird cuts in the middle of the hearts, I would love to hear from you. If you liked the video, guys, like it. If you really liked it and you're not subscribed yet, have a think about doing so. And I'll catch you guys next week. See ya.